test, 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 test. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. What we're going to do here is we're going to do two topics. I'm going to talk about just two things here. We're going to talk about the slope formula and how to use it again, some pointers on it for you. And then we're going to talk about how to take point slope form, essentially solve it for y. Oops, spelled that wrong. Solve for y and turning it into slope intercept form. So let's dive in real quick. So if you remember, slope formula is this. Slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We phrase that change over y over change over x. And what you'll notice, if you compare that just out of curiosity, when we talk about point slope form, it's very similar from point slope form. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so there's slope formula, and what do you do when you have it? Why do you use that? How can you utilize it? Well, predominantly you'll utilize it when you have 2 points, say like 3, -5, and 5, -10, say. Okay, and you want to find the slope between those 2 points. What you do, the slope equals, and you set it up where you start with that, where you put those minuses in at that division bar, that fraction bar. And a good rule of thumb is to label these guys, and you can then match them up with your slope formula up here. So if I want y2 in that spot right there, I go over here and I look at what I had labeled y2, so I'm going to write -10 in that spot. If I want y1, I go over here, I labeled that y1, and I put that down right there, so -5, and I can continue with the other points. If I want x2, x2, x2 goes there, so I'm going to go write that in that spot. And then if I want x1 here, x1, x1, we're going to write that in the x1 spot. And then we simplify. So we've got -10 minus -5. -10 minus -5 is actually -10 plus 5, which will be -10 plus 5 is going to be -5. And then we have 5 minus 3, which will be 2. So we then have our slope of -5 halves. So that's the first one I wanted to talk about with you. The second one I want to talk about with you is point slope form to slope intercept form. So when we have an equation here, y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1, when we have an equation set up like that and we want to put it in slope intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, essentially what we want to do is we want to solve it for y. We want to isolate the y variable. We want to get rid of all the parentheses and such so that we get it into slope intercept form. Notice how the x's are written first, the x term is written first, and then the constant term is written second. So if we have an example here, say y minus 5 equals -3/2 x plus 4. X plus 4. First, to solve it for y and to get rid of the parentheses, we can distribute first, because that's almost like the most tempting thing out of the two things to do. We can distribute -2/3 or 3/2. So -3/2 x, -3/2 times 4. Again, I did that. Oops. So -3/2 times 4 is the same as -3/2 times 4 over 1. We can multiply across when we multiply fractions. So we get -12 over 2. That becomes -6. So we get a -6 there. And then we turn around and we want to continue to solve for y. So we're going to add 5. We're going to add 5. And we get y equals -3/2 x minus 1. And that would be in our slope intercept form here. Notice we have our slope. When we look at it, we have our slope of -3/2, and that is actually going to be represented in that same spot. So it was before. We also have this as our y-intercept as 0, -1. And I want to sneak in one more problem here before you go to the next station. I want to say we're going to combine point slope form to slope intercept form with using the slope formula. So if I say write an equation, an equation that passes through through the following points. Let's say 3, 2, and let's say 5 and -2. Okay, so when we go ahead and we want to write the equation of a line that passes through 3, 2, and 5, -2, and I would like that in slope intercept form in the end. Okay, so the first thing I would do is we need to take a look at what slope intercept form is. Oh, okay. So one thing that we need is we need to find the slope. So do we have the slope? Well, we have 2 points, and we know that we can use the slope formula between 2 points to calculate what the slope is. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to utilize this form, slope formula. Use slope formula, and we're going to write down the formula so that we memorize it, remember it. And we're going to drop in these minuses in that fraction bar before we even do anything. We can also label these points if that helps us. So now we're going to take y2, put it in the y2 spot. We can take y1, put it in the y1 spot. We're going to take 5, put it in the x2 of 5, put it in the x2 spot. We're going to take x1 of 3 and put it in the x1 spot. And we're going to simplify it, so it becomes -4/2, which then becomes a nice integer, -2. So now we have our slope, but we have this issue though. We don't, if we want it in slope-intercept form, and we don't have the y-intercept at all. So what do we do? Well, we have to recall that we actually have this second form of an equation, point-slope form, okay, where when we defined it yesterday, we talked about how x1, y1 was a point on that graph, and m was the slope. What's interesting here and curious here is this x1 could be the same as that 3, right? That x1 that we labeled up here, and this y1 could also be the same as this y1 that's written up there, that 2. And I think, and that's kind of where we're going to start. We're going to start there, then we're going to take a look and use this second type of problem where we're going to convert it and solve it for y. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to put in, a good way to start it is just writing this down before you actually try to put numbers in. Write that form down, strip the x1 from it and the y1 from it and the m from it, because we know we're going to put numbers in there. So if we put x1 being 3 in the x1 spot, and we put y1 being 2, putting it in the y spot, and we look to find our m being -2, and we put it in that spot. All right, so now we have it in point slope form, and we're going to turn that now into slope intercept form. We're going to use the same process we did up above while we distribute -2 to both. -2 times -3 is +6. Then we're going to add 2, and we're going to add 2, and we will get -2x plus 8, and that is the equation that passes through these 2 points, okay, the equation in slope-intercept form. And check out what happens when I do this. So I'm going to illustrate how often by graphing these 2 guys on a grid right here on the left. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and graph this equation that you guys just made. So we're going to start at +8, and we're going to go down to right 1, 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 and I'm going to keep going. Connect those dots with a nice straight line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at where those 2 original points wound up, see if those 2 points happen to be on the equation of that we just graphed, that y equals negative, this equation y equals -2x plus 8. So let's look up here. Let's look at these points. So we have this first point, and we're going to graph it in blue, 3, 2. So 3, 2, look at that right there on the line. So 5, -2. Let's say 5, -2, boom, right on the line as well. So that means if we connect those 2 points, we're going to get the same exact line, which is a good thing because that's what we wanted it to be. And then as a third token, let me graph it from point slope form right over here. From point slope form, we can read our x-coordinate of 3, and we can read our y-coordinate of 2. So we have a point 3, 2, 3, 2, right there, boom, on our graph. And if we use our slope that's written in point slope form, -2, from that, that'll give us the directions. Go down to right 1, down to right 1, we can reverse that up to left 1. Boom, we have the same line given those 2 points, given a point slope form, giving slope intercept form. All right, guys, you guys can sit tight until we rotate the groups. Thanks for listening. and enjoy a little bit of rest before you go to the next group. Peace.